Come on in. So that's great. Glad you're here. I wasn't here last week, so it sort of feels like it's been forever since I've been here. I took Jacob to another church in Charlotte last Sunday. He had to preach there, and so I was the chauffeur. And so now he's back in India. Everything's good. I do want to encourage you guys to please be praying for James, all of the folks in India, his pastors, because they are experiencing an ever-increasing intolerance by the government for religious liberty, and so they're experiencing quite a bit of persecution, stuff that's really odd and foreign to us because we don't experience those same types of things, but pastors being beaten, believers being intimidated, churches being shut down or demolished, and stuff just really is starting to ramp up quite a bit. So he asked that we would definitely, if we would be praying for them and remember them, because they most certainly, I can testify to this, they most certainly pray for us on a regular basis. So please remember them. So for today, let me talk with the guys a little bit. We are just sort of moving right along in our Song of Solomon series. We've only got about 2 or 3 more weeks here in this particular book, but we've had a good time. And if you've missed any of this particular series, make sure you go back online and catch those on YouTube. It would be a great advantage to you to do that. But today I want to talk specifically to the men and highlight the kind of man that every woman wants. Yeah, I know you're all thinking it's you. But we'll sort of reevaluate after the message, okay? Guys, you might think that you were the particular individual that I'm about to describe. Maybe you feel like you still are. Your wife could probably tell us the truth, but we can at least, all of us, think about, and even the ladies, you can participate in this, we could probably all come up with at least one name. Maybe it was a guy in high school or in college, but one name of that guy who always just seemed to be like a chick magnet. I know, you just thought of him right then. He's like, yep, that's the guy. Like, every girl wanted to date him, wanted to go out with that guy. And I know, yeah, you feel like you were probably that guy, but you might in reality fall into the next category, which was we can all come up with at least one or more names of guys who seem to have this ability to repel women. Okay? The first, that guy, he's like a lone porch light in a world of moths. Like everybody just flocks to him. You, or maybe somebody like you, whereas you have that ability to reject women like, like maggots. They're just not interested whatsoever. I would hate to be the one to have to admit it, but there are probably 1 or 2 in here that have hung on to that trait. And even though, despite you've managed to find a woman who agreed to marry you, still to this day, you have that ability to do something, say something, or act in some certain way that causes your wife to roll her eyes and think, why did I ever marry him? Like, what did I see in him? Okay? Just trying, I know that probably applies to nobody in here, but just trying to lighten the mood a little bit, because things are going to get a little serious here in a few minutes. But today, like I said, there are certain qualities that are attractive to women. There are certain characteristics and qualities and types of men that just no woman wants anything to do with. We're going to be looking more at the positive side of things today, what women really want. But before we do, I just want to touch on a few characteristics, a few traits that no woman wants. And so guys, this is a moment to really pay attention. Make sure that you don't fall into one of these descriptions. If so, you need to take care of this. And then we're going to jump into the really good stuff, because we got a lot of ground to cover today. We've been moving along in this series sort of at a slow pace, a few verses of Scripture here and there. Today we're going to cover like 2 chapters, but we're going to do it fairly quickly. Before we jump into the text, I was reading this survey or questionnaire, whatever it might have been, about certain types or qualities in men that women aren't necessarily attracted to. And so ladies, do whatever you need to do at this moment to sort of show that you agree with this and that you you can poke, you can point, you can, whatever, make subtle noises and grunts just to get the point across that, hey, I hope he picks up on this. But these are certain qualities that just, guys, your wives aren't looking to appreciate in you. One, they don't want men who are cheap. Okay, now, we do need to understand that there's a difference between being cheap and being frugal. Okay, she can appreciate you being a saver and trying to budget and manage money properly. But just being outright cheap, she's not interested in that. Wants nothing to do with that. She doesn't want a man who's arrogant, who doesn't have some sense of humility, or a man that is predictable. You can always have a plan, but don't be predictable. Okay? Mix it up a little bit. Surprise her every once in a while. Okay? She doesn't want a man who's argumentative. You can disagree, but just not verbally. Right? Don't be argumentative. She's not interested in a man who's boorish. Now, I didn't say boring. She doesn't like that either. But boorish, she doesn't want somebody who's rude, who's sort of coarse, and that's the opposite of gentle, right? Somebody who's just bad-mannered. And believe it or not, women don't like men who are needy. They actually do like men who act like men. She wants a man, not a pansy, okay? Let's just put it out there. So those are just a few. There's a whole another list to go with it. This is just a few. So married or single, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Those are some traits, some behaviors to try to avoid to improve your relationship with the opposite sex, okay? Now on to the really good stuff. What are they looking for? What kind of man does every woman want and desire? And it's not going to be some kind of exhaustive list, but we're going to look in Song of Solomon chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 10 all the way through chapter 7, verse 10. So we've got a long ways to go. But this gives us a real good picture of that type of man that every woman's interested in. And so, guys, this is for you today. If you're taking notes, man, get your pen out, get ready. If you're on the Bible app, get your thumbs ready. We're gonna roll. Now, next Sunday, every single one of y'all need to come back because we're going to turn the table. Next Sunday, I'm going to talk about the woman that every man wants. Okay, so it's 50-50 here, going both ways, but we're going to spend time today focusing on the guys. And just to bring us up to speed in case you've missed any of the weeks, we started out chapter 1 meeting Solomon and his to-be bride, the Shulamite. They fell in love, and we followed them all the way up through chapter 4. They've gotten married. This is their honeymoon. This seems like a couple that is absolutely crazy, head over heels about each other. They seem to be on this high that they will never come down from. And then we came into chapter 5. Last week, Trey mentioned the first few verses of chapter 5, verse 2 through verse 8, and we get a glimpse into a moment of conflict. Now, it's not a relationship ending kind of a conflict. It's not disastrous or anything like that. Every couple, even the best of couples, the most satisfied of couples, are going to have conflict. And that's not a terrible thing. Conflict can be helpful. Conflict can be a healthy thing so long as it's handled correctly. And so if you missed last week, go back and catch up on that. But they've had a disagreement. That's where we've left off. Solomon has left. He's decided, I'm not staying here and arguing about this. We don't know yet where he went. Maybe he went for a drive. Maybe he went to work on something in the garage. But he just needed to get away. In an effort to restore things, his bride has now gone to look for him. And she even goes out and solicits the help of some of her friends. We've noticed that throughout the book that some of her friends have been commenting on their situation and their love here and there. And so she goes to her friends and she basically says something to the effect of, Solomon and I, we've had a fight. There's been this misunderstanding. I need you to help me find him because we need to make things right. Their response to her was something to the effect of, why would we do that? We're not saying we're not going to help you, But what makes him so special? What makes Solomon better than any other man that we would help you? You see what they're thinking? Like, girl, don't even waste your time. He's like every other man. Just forget it and move on. But she convinces them to help her. And she answers the question, what's so special about him? And as we read through this, you're going to find out what kind of man every woman wants. And the first one is this. The woman, or the man that every woman wants, is the man who takes care of himself. What we're about to read in chapter 5 is a description of Solomon, a physical description. It's the first and only description like it in the entire book. Now, on the flip side of things, 3 different times Solomon describes his bride in a physical way, in a very detailed way, head to toe. 2 of those occasions are in what we're going to read today, but only once do we get to see what she sees. And what she sees, in her opinion, is a man who strives to take good care of himself and to present himself to her in the best way possible. And now, a lot of times when we're preaching on relationships and marriages and, the whole husband and wife thing, and I think I probably already said it a couple of times in this series, I challenge ladies, I challenge you wives, because men are such visual creatures, to strive to look your best for your husband. Okay? Because we respond to what we see. But I think where we go wrong is neglecting to challenge the husbands to do the same. We fail to do that. We fail to see that that's just as important. Now, guys, I don't think that there's a wife in here who's expecting you to look like Mr. Universe. But I can bet you that she would appreciate knowing that you desire to look your best for her. And that you want to dress it up a bit for her. Because that says something to her, okay? And so we have this description here of some physical traits of Solomon. And we know that these physical traits can also be viewed in light of some non-physical traits that are important as well. But they ask, what's so wonderful here about Solomon? And she says, well, let me just tell you. In verse 10, she says, my beloved is radiant. Another word for that is he's dazzling. Bring that up to 2017, he's hot. My beloved is hot and ruddy. That means he has a dark, a reddish complexion. He is outstanding among 10,000. In her eyes, he is head and shoulders above any other man. There is no one to whom he can be compared. His head is purest gold. He's talking about how she values him. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. Perhaps he's still quite young. He's vibrant. He's full of energy. His eyes are like doves by the water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. Just like when he described her and spoke of her eyes, she's talking about his purity, gentleness, peacefulness in his eyes. His cheeks are like beds of spice yielding perfume. He actually smells good. He's enticing. He's pleasing to be around. His lips are like lilies dripping with myrrh. They're sweet. They're pleasant and pleasurable. His arms are rods of gold set with topaz, likely talking about his strength. His body is like polished ivory decorated with lapis lazuli. In other words, he's in good shape. He's still keeping it together. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. He's stable, and he has a stately stature about him. His mouth is sweetness itself, not just talking about his physical mouth and his lips, but his words and what he says is kind and sweet. He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. This is my friend, daughters of Jerusalem. So she just made her case about her husband. And we've seen him over and over and over hold nothing back in expressing his love for his wife, how much he appreciates her and what he thinks about her and how he doesn't take her for granted. But he's also showing here through her description of him that he is continuing to make an effort to please her simply by the way he looks and by the way he cares for himself. So again, she doesn't expect you to be on the cover of GQ, but at least try to keep yourself together. Try to make yourself presentable to her in a way that would communicate to her that, hey, I want you to want me. And I want to keep things hot, okay? That's what women like to see. They want a man who takes care of himself. Now, after a description like this, her friends are all the more happy to help her find him. Like, can you blame them? Like, oh yeah, we'll go help you find him. Now, maybe it's all innocent. They just want her to be happy and for them to be restored. Or it might be they're thinking, after a description like that, I might want to find him myself. Maybe they want to run a little interference and say, yeah, we'll all look for him, and whoever finds him first keeps him. I don't know why, but they agree to go out looking for him, and in chapter 6, they find him. And it says that he went down to his garden. So I told you that's what he did. Maybe it wasn't the garage, and he didn't go out for a drive, but he went somewhere. He had to get away just to sort of cool his mind and sort of settle down a little bit. He went out to the garden, maybe do a little yard work, just to let some time pass, let things settle down. Now you can read chapter 6 on your own and find out that he's not angry. He's not holding on to bitterness. He doesn't start yelling and screaming, throwing things. He just needed simply to get away, to let off some steam. And this obviously worked, because what we see in chapter 6, verse 4 through 9 is another description of his bride from Solomon. And it shows us that he's gazing into her eyes. He's totally forgiven her. And they have come to this place where they're sort of in a make-up moment together. He's looking into her eyes, and in verse 5, he actually tells her to look away because your eyes overwhelm me. You're so beautiful, and your eyes are so beautiful. Just look away. All right, so they're making up. They're patching things up. In this particular description, he concentrates on her facial features. He's not talking about her body, and he's not doing anything. He's just looking into her eyes and talking with her one-on-one. And he says to her in verse 8, he says, 60 queens there may be, and 80 concubines, and virgins beyond number. I'm just guessing here, that might be why they was fighting. There's too many other people involved in our relationship. Now, we have been up front and said from the beginning of this series that we're taking and reading a book here written by a man who is said in 1 Kings to have had over 700 wives and concubines. Now, we're taking relationship advice from this guy. And I understand that's hard to reconcile that in our minds. But nonetheless, God has given us this couple as an example of how to do things right and how to follow his design for marriage between one husband and one wife. And he assures her here, he says, listen, I know I've made my mistakes. And yes, I've sort of wandered off, and I've invited other people into our relationship, but listen, my dove, verse 9, my perfect one is unique, the only daughter of her mother and the favorite one of the one who bore her. He's trying to tell her, you are the only one who has my heart. You are the only one who is this special to me. And so we're going to move into this next characteristic off of this, as they have this sort of make-up moment that shows us the kind of man every woman wants, and not just a guy who takes care of himself, but a man or a husband who's sensitive to her longing for love. Every woman's looking for a man who is sensitive, who picks up on her longing, her desire to be loved. Now we get to verses 11 and 12 in chapter 6. And it's said that these two verses can be the most difficult verses in the entire book to interpret. because people don't agree on who's talking. Is it Solomon? Is it the bride? And what are they trying to say? And what is the time frame of what they're saying? I happen to believe it's her that is doing the speaking. It's in this make-up moment. They're looking into each other's eyes. She speaks what we're about to read, and what she says is referring back to something that happened in the past. She's taking us back all the way to the day they met. And she says in verse 11, I went down to the grove of nut trees to look at the new growth in the valley to see if the vines had budded or the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of my people. What I think she's saying is, what this sounds like to me, is this is a woman speaking to her husband. She says, Solomon, now realize we're talking to the king. She says, Solomon, I didn't ask for all of this. You see, before I realized it, I saw someone I was attracted to. I didn't know it was the king. This is just an attractive man. Some sparks begin to fly. Before I realized it, I had fallen in love and I was set among chariots. I became a queen. And so what she's saying is, I didn't ask for all of this. But like any young girl, I always dreamed of and longed for the day that I would find true love. Never in a million years did I think I would actually become the queen. But queen or no queen, I want you to know that I want to be treated like one. I need to be loved. I need to be respected. I need to be reassured and feel like I'm secure in this relationship. That's what I think she's saying. Solomon picks up on that. He zeroes in on her longing for love and her needs. He's sensitive to that. And by what I read in the text, it's like he swoops her away to take her. Listen, we got to get away. Me and you need some alone time. We got to work some things out. Because the reason I say that is because verse 13, listen, they're out in a public place. In verse 13, those who are in that place say, come back, O Shulamite. Come back that we may gaze on you. You got to realize, this is the queen. And so the people want to see her. They want to admire her. They want to gaze at her. They're impressed by her. They want a public viewing. But Solomon says, no. What this moment calls for is not a public viewing, but a private viewing, if you know where he's going with this. Because what happens next is in chapter 7, we once again, just like in chapter 4, find ourselves in the privacy of their bedroom. They wanted her to dance for them publicly, to sort of entertain them. Solomon is now saying, no. She is not for public view. She's not for your eyes. She's not going to dance for you. If she's going to dance for anybody, it's going to be for me. And dance she does. Let me tell you. All right, we're going to read this here in just a few moments, but it's almost as if like in the soft glow of a candlelit room, this woman begins to dance. And we'll see that she is not the shy, insecure girl we met in chapter 1, but the love her husband has for her has absolutely transformed her. She has definitely, by this point in her life, come out of her shell, and as she moves in front of her husband so gracefully, even seductively, he begins to describe what he sees. And he begins to compliment what he sees. And now, unlike what he does before, when he started his descriptions of her before, he would start at her head and work his way down her body. This time, he does it differently. And it makes sense because if she's dancing, he starts at the floor. He starts with her feet and begins his view, his scan upwards, okay? And so this indicates as well something that every woman's looking for in a man, because this description is the longest one we have, the most detailed description, which tells us that every woman wants a man who grows in his knowledge of her. Husbands, your wife wants you to grow in knowledge of her, to learn everything you can about her. Now, this physical description, while it borrows some terms and phrases from chapter 4, we're going to see that Solomon advances into some new sort of uncharted territory as far as his descriptions go, and it proves to us that he's growing in his knowledge and his appreciation and his attraction for his wife, not just physically, but very particularly, because he mentions some things here that he has not dared to even mention before. He focuses on at least 10 different aspects of his wife's beauty, all of which, again, can be related to some non-physical attributes. But he gets quite graphic. Listen here to what he says in chapter 7, verse 1. Again, starting with her feet, he says, "How beautiful your sandaled feet, O prince's daughter. Your graceful legs are like jewels, the work of an artist's hands." He's describing her shape. Your legs, your thighs are shapely and attractive. And as he begins to move up, he says, "Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine, and your waist is a mound of wheat encircled by lilies." All right, before we go any further here, let me explain what just happened. Because I know we don't really realize it, but there is a loose and somewhat poor interpretation of the Hebrew language here. I take this from those who know much more about it than I do. But this definitely makes sense. He's moving his eyes from the floor up. He says, your feet, your legs, and then in an English translation, it says your navel, which would be like our belly button, and then he says your waist. That is not a logical progression. The Hebrew language for navel is woohoo. Look it up. Your woo and your waist. All right, so he's moving up. He's only describing from here to here. All right, so I just want you to be informed followers of Christ. Okay? Now he begins his upward progression again, borrowing from chapter 4, where he says, your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle. We've heard that before. You know, talking about them being young and those being still sort of perky and that kind of thing. But see, I don't think that they're still quite that young. This is not a young couple we're talking about anymore. Chapter 8 gives us a glimpse into their later years. This is not that young, just got married couple anymore. They're not old, but they're aging at least. And so it's like, why does he still describe those as two young fawns? Because we all know they don't stay young forever. Okay? Like as the years go on, maybe he should have traded that for, those are like two Galapagos turtles. You know, I mean, I don't know. I think, and that's just for laughs, but I think what he's saying to her, no matter what reality is, okay, I see you the way I saw you then. I still see you as that young girl I met however long ago it was. I still desire you as much as I did the day we met. All right? And then he goes on. He says, your neck, in verse 4, is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are the pools of Heshbon by the gate of Bath-rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon looking toward Damascus. It's not like she's Pinocchio or anything like that. He's not saying you got a long nose. It's just that is a part of your facial features that it's just, you know, that I love about you, that kind of thing. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel. Your hair is like royal tapestry. The king is held captive by its tresses. How beautiful you are and how pleasing, my love, with your delights. Did you notice he said how captivated he is by her? I mean, he's saying that the more he learns about her, the more he loves her. The more he's impressed with her. Every detail, every particular thing about you is delightful, is pleasing, is a blessing. And he admits here to only having named a few. He's like, I got a whole list of things I love about you. These are just a few things. Because he said in the plural form, her delights, how pleasing, her delights. There's so many other things that he could have mentioned. And just think, guys, how exciting that would have been for her. To hear her husband reassure her that his love and desire for her over time has not diminished in the slightest, but it's growing. His knowledge of her, his understanding of her is not decreasing as the years go on, but it's increasing. What a blessing that would have been to her, and what a blessing it would be to your wife. For her to know that every day you're searching for something new in her. You're learning about. A few years ago, it's a little more than that, but you remember the Fireproof movie? Most of you watched that. If you didn't, I know it's a little outdated, but go back and watch that. There's a moment in the movie where the main character, he's talking about his marriage problems with a friend of his, and this friend challenges him on this very point. Grow in knowledge of your wife. And he sort of uses the illustration like it's an education. And he says, unfortunately, most men, most husbands, have what would only equal a high school diploma in knowledge of their wife. He says what they need is a college education. We should strive to earn our master's and our doctorate in knowledge of our wife. The point is that the more knowledge we have of our spouse, the more intimate the relationship becomes. So that's what our wives are looking for from us, guys. That we grow in knowledge of them. We learn what they like, what they dislike, how to please them, what touches their heart. And this is the last one to bring things to a close. The woman, or the man that every woman wants, is the man who remains passionate about his pursuit of her. A man who remains passionate about his pursuit of her. This has to be one of the worst offenses that we as husbands can commit against our spouse. And I have to be honest here that I'm guilty. I've done this very thing, to relent and rest from the passionate pursuit of our wife. It's as if, guys, that when we say I do, we get it in our mind that the chase is over. We've won the prize. Like, we have her now. We make our wives feel like they are the unfortunate victim or prey. We've caught them. The chase is over, and so now they're not going anywhere. They're stuck. That should never, ever be the case. And the reason I say I'm guilty of this is because just a few weeks ago when Trey was preaching, he mentioned the things we used to do, the key word is used to do, to communicate to our spouse, who's now our spouse, when we were dating, we communicate to them how much we love them and appreciate them and, how googly-eyed we were about them. What were those kind of things? And now, depending on what generation you're in, it's going to be a little different. Today's generation, you're going to use like social media, texting, emojis, and all that kind of stuff to communicate to somebody how over the hills you are for them. Like back in our day, we dated in pre-cell phone days. Like I know some of you younger ones, you're like, there was pre-cell phone days? There were days when nobody had cell phones? Absolutely. We dated in those days. But see, I was one of the cool ones. I had a pager. And I was important. So, you knew you was something, you had a pager. I would go away for Bible college all week, every week, come home on the weekends, I didn't have a phone. We didn't have a way to talk. There was one payphone in the hallway of the dorm. That's the only way we could communicate if we had like a calling card or something. So as a way to keep in touch, she would send me text messages on my pager, all right? She would page me with little numerical codes that I would have to sit down and think in my mind, okay, on a phone, the 2 is A, B, C, 3 is D, E, F, and figure out what she's trying to say to me. I love you, I miss you, all those kinds of things. You're so hot. I don't remember if that was one or not, but probably should have been. But so I would spend time. Sometimes it'd take just a matter of seconds, and sometimes a matter of minutes. Some things I just never got right. You know, like, what is she trying to say? But in those days, it would have been nothing for me to sit down and write Jessica a love letter, 2 pages long. I mean, I did it all the time. Send her flowers. I mean, she still has a box in our closet at home to this day that has those old letters in it. She has movie ticket stubs from when we went out dating, went to a movie, or we went to some event together, a concert or whatever it might have been. She has dried rose petals from flowers that I sent her 15 years ago. But here it is. Here's where I'm going to admit to you guys. This is to my shame. You can plot it on a line, like on a timeline. March 20th, 2004, the pursuit slowed and began to stop. March 20th, 2004 was the day we got married. We went on our honeymoon. We took a nice cruise. Man, it was awesome. I remember we were coming down the ramp, getting off the cruise ship, and I noticed her crying. I'm sitting there running through my head like, what just happened? We've had one of the greatest weeks of both of our lives. We just got married. All we've done this morning is get up, eat breakfast, pack. Which one of those 3 things did I do wrong? And I asked her, I was like, what's wrong? Her words exactly. It's not going to be the same. I don't know if she knew for sure what she was saying or even understood it. I certainly didn't understand it and know what the heck she was talking about. But she was right. She was right. I look back now and I see from that moment, it was never the same. Because the pursuit began to stop. The love letters stopped. The flowers stopped. I couldn't tell you the last time we went to the movies. I really don't know. Seriously. Your wife wants someone who will remain passionate about their pursuit of her. And right now, you see, I'm in a moment of my life where I look back and I see, man, I really could have done things a lot better. Now I'm going to do something about it. And I'm living in a constant state of awareness that I'm going to live down and I'm going to make up for lost time. And I'm going to make up for my laziness. I mean, hey, we're super busy. Way busier than we were when we first got married. But that can't get in the way, and that can be no excuse. So let me tell you something, guys, and I hope that if you can relate to me, if you're sitting here thinking, man, I know exactly what you're talking about, because you just described me to a T. I've gotten lazy. I've relented in the pursuit of my wife. Let me tell you something that I hope right now will scare you straight. If you don't remain passionate about the pursuit of your wife, somebody else will. That's not what your wife wants. It's not what she desires. She's not out looking for nobody. She doesn't want you to be replaced. She doesn't want to be complimented by anybody else. She doesn't want to be pursued by anybody else but you. So you best get on your game, or somebody else will do what you're supposed to. I know it's heavy, but that's the truth. She wants you to stay passionate about her, okay? Now, I want you to listen here as we bring things to a close, to these final words. Again, this couple is in this makeup moment. Both Solomon and the bride speak, and he says in verse 7, your stature is like that of a palm, your breast like clusters of fruit. I will climb that palm tree. I will take hold of its fruit. May your breast be like clusters of grapes on the vine, and the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth be like the best wine. And she says, may the wine go straight to my beloved, flowing gently over his lips and teeth. I belong to my beloved, and his desire is for me. What a moment. He's sitting there basically saying to her, girl, I sure am glad we made up. And that's about to be on. Because you're like a palm tree, and I'm about to climb that tree. And there's some fruit at the top that I'm going to hang on to. So let's get ready for a wild ride, okay? Her response was, come and get it. If you can think you can handle this right here, come and get it, all right? We're going to stop right there, because I think that's probably about all y'all can handle. Men, here's your homework for the week. Here's your homework for the week, guys. Just like in the days that you were dating, I want you to ask your wife out on a date this week. Now, if you can't make it happen this week, schedule it for sometime in the very near future. But this week, pursue your wife. Ask her to go out on a date with you. You take the initiative. I want you to plan the evening. I want you to make the preparations. I would suggest maybe even a gift. You know, maybe it's some flowers or something that you know, something small she likes. But plan that evening. Make it special. Over dinner or whatever the date happens to be, I want you to tell her what you have learned about her over the years that you absolutely have come to love. All right? Let her in on some things that you know about her, that you've learned, that maybe she didn't know you knew, but that you love, okay? Make sure you leave your cell phone at home. We don't want any distractions. And because she wants a man who takes care of himself, take a shower, put on some cologne, like wear some nice clothes or something. Present yourself to her in a desirable, pleasing way. All right? Guys, can we do that? Yes. Yes, Pastor, we can do that. All right. It will go well with you if you take my advice, okay? So with every head bowed and every